What if I told you that 5 seconds without gravity would be enough to end civilization as we know it? The moment gravity disappears, physics goes haywire. The fundamental force that shapes our reality vanishes in an instant. Everything not physically attached to something else becomes a projectile. Your morning coffee doesn't just float. It shoots upward at whatever speed Earth's rotation gives it at your latitude. At the equator, that's about 1,000 miles per hour sideways. You, your furniture, your car, your pets, everything launches into uncontrolled flight. But here's what most people don't realize. We wouldn't float gently like astronauts. Earth spins at tremendous speed, and gravity is what keeps us moving with it. Remove gravity, and we keep moving in a straight line while Earth curves away beneath us. It's like being on a massive merry-go-round that suddenly loses its floor. We'd appear to fly upward and eastward at hundreds of miles per hour. The effect varies by latitude. At the poles, you'd experience a gentler liftoff. But at the equator, you'd rocket sideways at 465 meters per second. In New York, you'd launch at about 350 meters per second. In 5 seconds, equatorial residents would find themselves nearly a mile and a half from where they started, tumbling through the air. Inside buildings, it's instant devastation. Every object becomes a missile. Furniture, appliances, decorations, all flying in different directions at different speeds. Windows shatter from the sudden pressure changes. Anyone indoors faces a lethal barrage of everyday objects turned deadly projectiles. The lucky ones are those already outside with nothing above them. The real nightmare begins with our atmosphere. Earth's gravity holds about 5.5 quadrillion tons of air in place. The moment gravity vanishes, all that air begins expanding into space. It doesn't disappear instantly, but the process starts immediately and it's catastrophic. Air pressure drops precipitously. Within seconds, it's like being transported from sea level to the top of Mount Everest, then beyond. Your ears don't just pop, they experience trauma. The air in your lungs expands rapidly. If you tried to hold your breath, your lungs could rupture. You must exhale immediately, but then you can't breathe back in because there's increasingly less air to breathe. The temperature plummets as the atmosphere expands. Basic thermodynamics tells us that rapidly expanding gases cool dramatically. The sudden temperature drop would create instant fog as moisture condenses, then freezes. You'd go from normal weather to Arctic conditions in seconds, all while gasping for increasingly thin air. But 5 seconds isn't long enough for all the atmosphere to escape. When gravity returns, the air comes crashing back down. The returning atmosphere would create devastating winds as high-altitude air rushes back to fill the vacuum. These winds would dwarf any hurricane, potentially reaching speeds of several hundred miles per hour. The atmospheric compression would also generate intense heat, creating a global heat wave immediately after the freeze. This rapid temperature shift from freezing to scorching would stress every living thing on the planet. The oceans present their own apocalyptic scenario. Water, like everything else, would start rising the moment gravity disappears. But unlike solid objects, water would behave like a liquid in freefall, forming massive bubbles and sheets as it lifts from ocean basins. Coastal areas would see something unprecedented. Walls of water lifting away from shores, exposing ocean floors never before seen by human eyes. Ships would find themselves suspended in rising bubbles of water, their crews experiencing the surreal sight of fish and marine life floating around them in expanding water spheres. The real terror comes when gravity returns. Trillions of tons of water come crashing back down. The impact would generate tsunamis that make the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami look like a ripple. These wouldn't be normal tsunamis. They'd be compression waves caused by massive volumes of water slamming back into ocean basins from above. Coastal cities worldwide would face walls of water potentially hundreds of feet high. The returning water wouldn't just create surface waves. The impact would generate powerful underwater currents and turbulence. Marine ecosystems would be devastated. The mixing of different water layers would disrupt ocean temperatures and currents for years. The oceanic food chain would collapse, leading to mass extinctions in marine life. Perhaps the most overlooked consequence involves Earth itself. Our planet isn't a solid ball, it's more like a water balloon filled with molten rock. The crust is relatively thin, held in place partly by its own weight under gravity. Remove gravity, and the crust experiences unprecedented stress. The sudden release of gravitational pressure would cause the crust to expand slightly. This might seem minor, but when you're talking about billions of tons of rock moving even a fraction of an inch, the energy involved is staggering. Every fault line on Earth would experience sudden stress changes. Dormant faults would activate. Active faults would slip catastrophically. The result? Global earthquakes. Not just a few tremors, but thousands of simultaneous earthquakes as the planet's crust adjusts to the absence and return of gravity. Most would be minor, but many would be devastating. Cities built on fault lines, Los Angeles, Tokyo, Istanbul, would face immediate destruction. Even areas typically considered seismically stable would experience significant shaking. Volcanoes present another horror. The pressure changes in magma chambers would trigger eruptions worldwide. Dormant volcanoes might reawaken. Active ones would explode with unprecedented force. The combination of atmospheric chaos and volcanic ash would darken skies globally, potentially triggering a volcanic winter that could last years. This climate catastrophe would make the nuclear winter scenarios of the Cold War look mild by comparison. Modern civilization depends on infrastructure that assumes constant gravity. Every building, bridge, dam, and tower is designed with gravity in mind. 5 seconds without it would be catastrophic for human construction. Tall buildings would face immediate structural failure. As gravity disappears, the load on support structures vanishes, then returns with devastating impact. The whiplash effect would crack foundations, buckle support beams, and shatter windows. Many skyscrapers would collapse entirely. Those that remain standing would be structurally compromised, uninhabitable death traps waiting to fall. Bridges would fare even worse. Suspension bridges would see their cables go slack, then snap under the returning load. Concrete bridges would crack from the stress reversal. Most major bridges would either collapse immediately or require demolition. The global transportation network would be severed in thousands of places. Power infrastructure would fail catastrophically. Power lines would snap. Transformers would explode from the electrical surges caused by moving components. Nuclear power plants would experience immediate emergency conditions as cooling water fled their reactors. While 5 seconds isn't enough for meltdowns, the damage to cooling systems would force emergency shutdowns globally. The power grid would collapse, plunging the world into darkness. For humans caught in this 5-second apocalypse, survival would depend entirely on location and luck. Those outdoors in open areas might survive the experience, though they'd face injuries from their brief flight and hard landing. Those indoors or in cities would face much worse odds. The immediate death toll would be staggering. Millions would die from building collapses, flying debris, and catastrophic landings. Those who survived the initial event would face the secondary disasters: tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and infrastructure collapse. Medical systems would be overwhelmed and largely non-functional. Injuries that would normally be treatable would become death sentences. The psychological trauma would be universal. Every human on Earth would experience 5 seconds of absolute terror, floating helplessly while their world disintegrated around them. The shared global trauma would leave deep psychological scars. Post-traumatic stress would be the norm, not the exception. Society would struggle to function with an entire population suffering from severe trauma. Long-term survival would be equally challenging. With infrastructure destroyed, food distribution would cease. Water treatment plants would be offline. Cities would become death traps as millions of survivors competed for dwindling resources. The environmental impact would extend far beyond human concerns. Every ecosystem on Earth would be disrupted. Forests would be stripped of leaves and small branches as everything loose flew upward. Animals would be injured or killed by the thousand. Birds in flight would be particularly vulnerable, suddenly finding themselves in free fall. Soil erosion would be catastrophic. The top layer of soil, held in place by gravity and root systems, would be disturbed everywhere. When gravity returned, much of this soil wouldn't return to its original location. Agricultural land would be damaged beyond immediate repair. Desertification would accelerate globally as protective vegetation was stripped away. Aquatic ecosystems would face unique challenges. Lakes would experience the same upheaval as oceans. Rivers would momentarily flow backward or stop entirely. Fish and other aquatic life would be thrown into the air with the water. Many would die from the trauma or find themselves stranded when the water returned to different locations. If this glimpse into gravitational catastrophe has left you amazed at how precarious our existence really is, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more mind-bending explorations of what-if scenarios that will change how you see the